everyone. I'm still working on the intro, so please forgive me. But I want to introduce you to my friend Kim.
Hi.
This is Kim, and we have gotten back into reading together. So we've decided to have this segment on the channel where we chat about our current reads. So welcome back to Banter and Booklore. So we're going to be talking about our October reads. And I just want to preface this by saying Kim reads way faster than me. So let's keep this in mind every time we do one of these videos. Okay, just the disclaimer thrown in there. So how was your month of reading, Kim?
It was good. I read 8 books. I'm currently about halfway through a 9th book, but I probably won't finish it tomorrow because, you know, both of us having kids, we're going to be trick-or-treating tomorrow rather than reading. So
crazy.
Yeah, I know. I can't believe it. So I also did more audiobooks this month. So typically, you know, Alex knows this, but I'm a reader. And I did more audiobooks. So I think that like my number is a little less than it usually is per month because 3 of the 8 books I did were audiobooks. So something a little different for me.
Yeah, I've noticed that you've been doing more of those. I also had 1 audiobook. Well, okay, I technically kind of had 2, but I haven't finished. I'm reading through Harry Potter for the first time. So I'm in Goblet of Fire, and it's dragging a little bit for me, but I'm very close to the end, but it still doesn't count because I haven't finished. So,
yeah, anyone who's read that doesn't blame you for dragging a little bit on Goblet of Fire, I'm sure.
Yeah, I think because coming after Prisoner of Azkaban, like, that book was so good that I'm having a harder time getting into this one. Also, my sister-in-law was saying this one kind of is like a new like level of like type of
dark.
I mean, yeah, it's a little dark.
Yeah, it's a lot darker, and then it gets continually darker as the series goes on. So yeah, I agree with that.
Light and easy of a read as
no
in the past like 3 books. So
yeah,
it's taking a little bit of an adjustment, but we're getting there.
Well, speaking of dark books, let's talk about the book that we both love that we buddy read this month because I think this is like the most hyped book right now, right? Like everyone's talking about it. It's been everywhere. So if you can't figure out what book we're talking about Quicksilver.
Yep. Quicksilver. That was my first book this month. And I was looking back. It took us, it's a hefty book. It's like, it's just shy of 600 pages. I think it's like 570 or something. So it took a little while to get through. I feel like we both have a lot of opinions on it, so I guess we'll just get right into it.
Yeah, you know, yesterday we watched a live Instagram feed of Callie, Hart, the author, with That Girl Reads on her Instagram, and it was great because I felt like it gave me a little bit of context, and I actually have changed my thoughts on it after some of the things that she shared. So I was really glad that we watched that because I felt like I learned a lot more about her thought process behind the series and not just the book.
Yeah, I think it's been hard. We've read a lot of unfinished series, and it's hard to like have full opinions on those books because we don't know what's coming. There might be things that don't make sense to us now that will make sense later, kind of thing.
Yeah, well, something I think you and I talked about, and we've discussed before, is like this was a 1 POV book, right? Like it was just the female main character's point of view the whole time, and that can get difficult to read because some females are just cringy. You're missing pieces. You know that there are secrets. Like I feel like you and I multiple times during this book were like, there's secrets we don't know, and why do we not know them? And when you have that dual POV, you get those secrets revealed, right? Like you know the other side as the reader, even if the characters don't always know them. So I was happy to hear that she said, like, this is the only book that's that way, and she plans for the rest of the series to be multiple POVs.
Yeah, I was in and out of that live, so there's probably a lot that I missed. But yeah, the thing about Quicksilver that like my critique, I guess, would be that I felt like the beginning was too there was a lot of time spent building up a setting and a world that like we jumped out of, like, and most of the book wasn't in that particular setting. So I feel like that maybe could have been a little shorter. There could have been a little bit more foreshadowing of like how the main chunk of the book was going to be. Like that came out of nowhere. It's hard to talk about things without.
I mean, I think there's going to be some spoilers. Like, I think that's just a natural point of this conversation. So if you haven't read Quicksilver, you might want to just like skip through a little bit here. But yeah, I mean, I
miss it by saying slight spoiler, and then
yeah, we won't like spoil everything for you, but there's going to be like naturally some spoilers in this conversation. And she actually in her live last night mentioned like, oh yeah, there are fae in the book, and like she gave that as part of her description. So she didn't feel like that was a spoiler that there were fae. So I found that interesting too, that you were like, I felt like it was shocking, and she was like, that's part of my narrative of the book, is that there's fae.
Yeah. I think if I went into Quicksilver pretty blind, I think if I would have done any digging, you probably would have found that. So
I think so. I didn't either, though. I went in pretty blind. I hadn't even read the description. The only reason I read it was because everyone's talking about it, and I felt like we have to read this. Everyone's telling me it's amazing, but I didn't read the summary before we read it, so I didn't know that either. I'm curious if the rest of the series is going to have more of the beginning of the book, like her world, her human world in it.
Yeah, that's true. That probably will play more of a part.
Yeah, because of spoilers that we shouldn't give on this one, but there is reason to think that could be part of the journey.
Yeah, we won't say anything about like major plot points that you should know about, but yeah, another so good points. I feel like I'm talking about the negative too much, but good points about Quicksilver. I felt like the characters were really great. I loved how she talked about Carrion, which is kind of like a comic relief character in a sense.
Yeah.
Her saying that like he wanted to lighten it up a little bit, and I really liked that a lot.
Yeah, and she talked about like he has his own story and personality too, which you and I have read a lot of other fantasy series, and I tend to like fantasy series that have a really strong like cast of friends, right? Like I want there to be a good supporting cast behind the FMC, MMC. Like that draws me into a book. And so for her saying like Carrion has more to him than even we've gotten to see, I'm like ready for it. Like I just like, he's so funny, he's endearing. He's just such an interesting like foil to, how did she say her name? Seraph?
Oh yeah. Totally. I was saying it in my mind, but yeah.
Yeah. And I just felt like I was happy to hear that she felt like he was an important character in the series and not just like a throwaway character.
Right. Yeah, I agree. I feel like it had heart. I feel like it felt like, you know, you're reading a book and you feel like it's special while you're reading it. You're like, I know this is going to be special. Like, I felt like that throughout. I will say that there were certain parts. This is where it gets hard because So, okay. I have two books that I'm going to be talking about in this video that I felt like this, where when you're in first person, it's hard to keep secrets from the reader because we're supposed to be in their head. There are a couple scenes where I was like, okay, like later on it was like, oh, actually I was doing this, but like we're in her head, so it didn't really make sense to me that like we weren't getting the full story as it was happening, if that makes sense.
Yeah. I wonder if some of that is just because, you know, she talked about this as her first romantasy book she's ever published. She used to write paranormal YA romance, but has mostly written dark romance. And so this was, you know, a 7-year in the making dive into romantasy. She said she started this series in 2017. And so I wonder if some of that is just, and I think the other thing is she talked about that she doesn't read romantasy. So she said, I wrote it, but I don't read other people's because I don't want their worlds to impact my world. And so I wonder if that's a lot of it, is like she just doesn't think through those components of what we've read in other Romantasy books, because we're seeing it because we've been reading them, but she isn't.
I think also a consequence of being self-published, like
Yeah.
I said to you before, Kim, that I feel like more eyes needed to be on this, more editors maybe.
Yeah.
Because there were
She
certain
is re-releasing it. I wonder if it's going to change at all.
Yeah, I'm curious to see too. Just because there were certain things where I'm like, this could have made so much more sense if it was just tweaked a little bit. But all in all, I felt like it was such a great book. And
well, let's talk about Kingfisher for a minute.
Okay.
I mean, talk about book boyfriends. Like, this guy is flawed, broody, but has like a huge heart that you see like very early on, and then has this like little bit of crazy, right? That you find out pretty early. Like, that's not a spoiler because you find out he's crazy,
I mean,
like pretty early in the story.
First time he's introduced to you, you're just kind of like, oh, this guy's insane. Like, but a really good reason for why that is. So
yeah.
That's for me, like, I know this is like a make-believe world, like there's literally mythical creatures, but like things have to make sense to me in my head in the context of the world, and I felt like him being crazy made sense, so I was happy with that.
Yeah, but he's not crazy in like a I am weirded out by you and like want to walk away from you slowly kind of crazy. Like, he's crazy in a way that also feels I don't know. I've never felt like a character, very few characters in Romantasy that we've read, I felt like weren't the hero complex, right? Like, they weren't trying to be the best guy, and they weren't trying to be great, and they weren't trying to save her. Like, he just is who he is, and he's trying to use her at the beginning because he knows a lot more. Like, it's that secret component. I don't know. I feel like it's hard to talk about Kingfisher as a full character without giving away spoilers to things that, come at the end of that book. But I really liked that last night she talked about that she wanted him to be flawed, and she only writes male characters that are flawed. Because she said that just makes them more realistic. Even if the world they're in doesn't seem realistic, she wants a main male character that feels real and feels like somebody you would know if you took away some of those like magical components or those like extra things. And I felt like Kingfisher delivered on that for me.
Yeah, I'd have to agree for sure. All right, so all in all, overall feelings about Quicksilver. We loved it.
Every person should read this book. But if you don't read it right now and you wait until the summer of 2025, because the next book she says is not coming out until fall of 25. So if you wait, no shame on waiting. But this is one that you talked about already. Like, we've read a lot of unfinished series. Mm-hmm. I wasn't that up. I want to read more, but I wasn't like, oh my God, what did I do to myself? I was like, I'm really excited that I read this book and I really liked it, and I'm excited to read the next one whenever that is. I'm not like mad that we read it before then.
Yeah, it wasn't an insane cliffhanger.
Right? Yeah.
It left you wanting more, but like, it wasn't like, I don't feel tortured right now.
No, I totally agree. That's a great way to phrase it. Like, I don't feel tortured finishing the book.
Yeah. Okay, so should we move to the next one?
Yeah, because this one is going to be a little bit more of a hot debate, because we both loved Quicksilver, but the other buddy read we did this month went a little haywire.
Yeah. I don't want to say we disagreed on it, because I feel like we had a lot of the same feelings.
Yeah.
One of us continued the series and one of us did not.
And now our opinions on the series are very different, I think.
Yeah. For sure. So we are talking about Gild.
Which is the Plated Prisoner series.
Okay. Yes. And do you know the author? I didn't write it down.
Yeah, it's Raven Kennedy.
Okay. So, Gild by Raven Kennedy. We read this together. I don't think I would have had any interest outside of Kim having a friend who said that she read the whole series and that it was great. but yeah, it felt a lot like Akatar, where the first book was just like kind of meh. And honestly, like if Kim hadn't continued on the series and told me that it's good, now I plan on reading it because I trust Kim. But a friend of a friend wasn't enough to like continue me on. So
Yeah, whereas I read the first one, felt like it was also meh, and my friend was like, just keep going, keep pushing through. And I've seen other reels that said that too, that like if you stop at the first book, you miss the good parts of this
yeah,
series.
yeah,
And I feel like this author is very well known. Like she's been writing for a long time in the romantasy realm. And so I think people really respect her as an author, and this is her most popular series by far. But I mean, it's hefty to undertake a 6-book series when you're like, that first book was oh something. It was something.
yeah.
But I know. So now I've read the first 3 books. I'm about halfway through book 4 in the series. I feel very differently about the female main character than I did in book 1, which Oren, Oren, is that, I guess that's how we would say her name. That's how
All
I've
of
been
these,
saying it in my head, so.
I'm just winging it in my head. I like just, I don't even think I fully say them in my head. I'm just kind of like, yeah,
Yeah.
acknowledging that their existence, but not really attempting to say them. But
And I think a lot of what you didn't like and what I didn't love at the time but understand now is like she seems so weak. Like it's hard to read a female character that seems like she's just a pushover all the time. And you're like,
yeah,
why? Why are you just letting people manipulate you like this?
not even like, not even just letting it happen, but like loving the people who are like
Yeah.
doing bad things to her. So that's kind of where it's just, it's hard for me to read a book where I'm not identifying with the main character, like especially when it's in their point of view. It's like, why are you being so dumb? Like that's what I found myself saying this whole time. Like the whole time I was reading the book, was just like just getting frustrated at the female main character. Um, and also, I mean, essentially, it's about like sex slaves in a sense, like, and that was really hard for me to read. There was like essay involved, and like that was really heavy. I don't know if that continues in the series. Maybe you can answer that, but
Not really.
yeah,
The idea of them being in there is an important plot line, and so I'm realizing like because so Alex knows this, but I'll give this preface. My friend who recommended the series, when we started this, I texted her and was like, "Is this um, like going to be the whole thing?" And she was like, "No, no, no, it's not. I promise." Um, but without the full context to that part of the story, where I'm at right now wouldn't make as much sense. Like it's
okay,
an integral plot line, but the explicit nature is not integral anymore and is not even like much in like I would say book 2 is very tame compared to book 1.
yeah,
And it
it's a
kind of backs off on that component of it. It's still a spicy series, like don't get me wrong, but the spice shifts in its nature um, to more of the male character, female main character than it
okay.
was before. But you need that context. So I felt like when I read the book, I was like, don't love this. Like, what is this? Now I'm like, oh, I understand now. I understand this other character. I understand this plot story because we read through that part of it.
Yeah, yeah. Um,
And I will also add to your point of like, she is kind of weak and hard to identify with, but there's a reason behind that. And like, you're missing her secrets. So like, we don't know all of her secrets in book 1. And when you learn her secrets in books 2 and 3, you're more like, oh. And I saw a clip that because like the 6th book just came out very recently. So this is still very in the news right now. And I saw that she said that more than anything, she wrote this book not as a romantasy book, but as a women's empowerment book.
okay.
And I very much resonated with that as I am moving through the series, and I would guess even more so as I move on, where I know kind of it's headed.
Yeah, I love that there's redemption there because it very much feels like the opposite in the first book, in a sense,
Yeah.
in our objects and um,
Yeah, and you don't really know the main male character either. You're like the whole time like who else is in this story? And so it feels kind of strange. And I would say even at the end of the first book, you don't totally understand.
yeah,
It
wow.
takes like a good halfway point through the second book, maybe even a little bit further before you understand.
Well, I don't know if we should say this. I'll just cut it out if we can't, if we shouldn't. But I feel like it helped when you told me that the male main character was not introduced until like what was it, 75%.
Yeah, it was like 75, 80% of the way through the book.
It kind of helped me to know that because I was so infuriated by the other options.
Yeah. Well, and like
It was almost
you finished and you were like, I don't think he's like endearing to me at this point. And
yeah,
he's not. Like you don't know much about him. And you actually, I can say this without giving away any spoilers. You know less about him than you think you know at the end of book one. You think you know a little bit about him and you know nothing about him. Absolutely nothing. So, I felt like, oh, okay, like I'm interested in this like character. Nope, you have no idea.
yeah. I feel like you're just kind of indifferent. Like you're intrigued
Yeah.
a little bit, but like you're just kind of like, okay, like I guess that's where I'm at. Like where I wish there would have been a little bit more to push me through to the second book. I feel like ACOTAR had enough for me to read the second book. I feel like without your like recommendation, I probably wouldn't continue the series. So
Okay, but let's jump on that comparison here because you're referencing like the thinking about the main male character in ACOTAR and not loving. If we're gonna give spoilers about ACOTAR and you haven't read ACOTAR, you probably shouldn't even be watching this, to be honest. But I
yeah,
mean, you don't love Rhysand at the end of A Court of Thorns and Roses. You're like interested in him, but you're like, what? Who is this jerk? Like he like made a bet with her, and now she has to go see him for 1 week a month. Like this doesn't seem cool. And I feel like you feel negative or neutral about Rhysand, and I feel like that's how you feel about at the end of book one is Rip. So like about Rip, you're like, I don't know about Rip. Like I don't know what to think at this point.
I can't say that.
Or bad, right? Or bad.
At the end, yeah. Yeah. So, without giving too much away.
I mean, you can't give too much away because I promise you don't know anything yet, and I'm not going to tell you. So.
Those who haven't read the first book, I guess.
Yes, true.
But I will say that ACOTAR, I feel like I cared more about the characters by the end of the first book. Like,
that's fair.
Especially the main character. So, I feel still frustrated by, the main character, in this book. Though things got more interesting. I wish more of the book was like the end of the book. Like, if that makes sense.
Yeah, for sure.
But
I mean, I think like when you're building a 6-book series, how do you map that out, right? Like what is her process to map out? Like I'm sure she knew when she started book 1 what the end of book 6 was going to be. Yeah. So like how do you
it's keeping things interesting.
Yeah, and like how do you not give away too much at the beginning when you know you have 5 other books you have to fill? So I think the context is important. Obviously, I've not finished the series yet, so maybe when we do this in November, I'll have finished and can speak to the finished series. But right now, I'm like, yes, read it. Like it gets so good. The characters are excellent. The main male character, gem of a person. Like, talk about the things I loved about Kingfisher. This main male character has very similar things. So.
Yeah. All right. Well, I'm looking forward to finishing it then, if it comes highly recommended by you. So, have any of the books been 5 stars yet?
The third book I gave 4.75. It was very, very close, but it's been getting better and better. That one I feel like was the best one I read thus far. And there's a minor flaw that I didn't love in it, but it didn't deter me from the whole book, and it didn't deter me from downloading the next one immediately. So,
yeah. Okay. Well, that's good to know. So the other book that I read that I'll share is called Slinger. This one I feel like is very up and coming. Like, I'm just starting to see it, and I haven't seen it a lot, but every time I've seen it, people are raving about it. So that intrigued me. So just to preface, before Quicksilver, I think I read a few books in between, but or maybe not actually, but I did the Blood and Steel series, which was probably my favorite thing that I've read this year. Also recommendation by Kim.
Yes. I mean, if you haven't read that and you're watching this, like, you are absolutely missing out by not reading the Legends of Thasmar series. And she's writing more in that world, so, like, well worth a read.
Yeah.
But
we could do a whole other video on that.
We could literally do a whole video on how great that series is, for sure.
And I will say that I've been in a little bit of a slump, but these books have helped Quicksilver, and now Slinger, which was so good. While I was reading it, I was thinking this might actually surpass Blood and Steel for me, which we've talked about this before as well, that it's hard to compare incomplete series to a finished series. So I probably wouldn't have been able to say that with like a ton of confidence, but finishing the book, I definitely wouldn't put it above Blood and Steel, but it was still very good. The way this author writes, I really, really loved. I loved the female main character. In most romantasy books, there's a level of like frustration on my end about the female main character, and I think that kind of just is par for the course with these books, because like crazy things are happening and no one would like handle them the same way, I guess. Like, so I'm always thinking in terms of like, would I have done that? And if it's a no, then I get a little bit frustrated. But this character, every single decision that she made, I was like on board with. I'm like, okay, that makes sense. Like, I understand the feelings, I understand reactions to things and like redirections. So I really liked that, especially coming off of Quicksilver and Gild, which in both of those there were many situations where I was like not on the same page as the female main character. So that was refreshing. I really liked her writing style, and I've also been having a hard time with first person point of view, because a lot of the time, sorry Kim, you're hearing all of my hot takes like for a second time, but it feels like the way I described it to you is like XOXO diary, like,
yeah,
today I did this, like, and that's hard. Like, it's hard. I think it's tricky to do first person because you have to make it believable, and
and it's hard to do in book one when you're not as invested in the character. Like, if you wrote a diary, I'd be more interested, but we've been friends for years. Like, a new person I've never met, I'm like, I don't know if I care about what you're saying. So it's definitely hard at the beginning of a series.
Yeah. But I will say that there was never like a cringy moment for me as far as the point of view, the style and writing through the point of view. So that I really appreciated.
Is it coming out is this like, do you know anything about the series? You said like it ends on a cliffhanger, right? And it's going to be more books. Do you know how many books she's planning to write?
So first I'll touch on the ending, because that's like, it was wild. Like, I can't even, like, I saw of course, after I read it, I finished it at like 10:15 last night. And then I was up for like 2 hours afterward, just like really, like I just could not.
2 hours?
Yes, I could not settle myself. Like, it
oh my
was
gosh.
Like, very unsettling. And not even necessarily a cliffhanger, which you can consider it a cliffhanger, but more of like a twist, I guess.
Yeah.
More than anything, where you're just like, what the heck just happened? But I saw a video while I was like, of course, after
you were doom scrolling post book, which, like, I hope everyone else does that, because you and I both do that. As soon as we finish, we're like trying to find out more, watching people's thoughts, like watching videos about a series or a book.
It's like you want more of the book, but like there's
Yes.
so you're just
Yes.
like taking whatever you can get. Yeah, so I saw a video that the author posted because I follow her now on social. So I was watching this video and it was like her having this. She's like, I was writing this book for so long and I have this epiphany that like I can write whatever I want. And girl, it did feel like that. It felt like you just decided what I want, like, you know.
She's just like, I'm just gonna go for it. I'm writing whatever the heck I want, and I'm just gonna do it.
Yeah.
Cool,
So
cool.
I feel like when you read things, you kind of have rules in your head for like how things are allowed to go, and she just destroyed that. Like she was just like, I'm just gonna do what I want, and so it was. I'm very excited for the second book. I actually think I'll be reading this book again. I don't know if you saw my messages.
Yeah.
We'll go to bed. And
yeah, we'll probably buddy read this at some point, or at least like start a buddy read. We're both on Storygraph, so we do our buddy reads on there. So at least start a buddy read for me to read it, because with this rave of a review, I can't not read it.
It was so good. It's like I feel hesitant recommending it because I know the turmoil you're gonna be in, but like it's worth it. And I feel like the writing was so good that I have faith in the author that she's gonna make this okay.
Well, that's why I was asking you if you knew on her socials if it's like a 3-book series or a 5-book series, because I think that depends on the level of turmoil to relief comparison, right? If it's like a 5-book series and you end in turmoil on book 1, like goodness knows the torture she's going to enact for you, like a 4th Wing complex, right? Like you finish 4th Wing and you're like, oh my God, I know there's 4 more books and this is how she ended the first one. Yeah. But if there's 3, you're like, there has to be some relief in book 2 because there's only 2 more.
Yeah. So I think, she said that I read somewhere that it's going to be a duology. I don't know if she actually, but I saw it in the world online.
Okay.
So I'm sure it's going to be a duology. And it was supposed to be, the second book was supposed to be finished by the end of this year, but I think her mom got cancer, and so she's been dealing with life things, and I think she said that it's going to be done early next year. So who knows if that just means the first half of the year, or does that
mean
we don't know. It is, I think,
without a date, you feel anxious, right? You're like, what is the beginning of the year?
Yeah. So it is self-published, and I feel similar feelings about Quicksilver. So Quicksilver just got picked up, but it was self-published originally, and that's the form that we read it in. So I don't know. I'm eager to reread because I feel like I'm hoping that this twist makes enough sense to me. I'm kind of on the cusp of like feeling like it's unbelievable, but I want to reread and see like how much finesse was put into it making sense, if that makes sense. It's hard to talk about this without giving things away, but yeah, so I'm excited to like look at the receipts, I guess, and read it a second time and see like how well interwoven it was into the whole book. So
yeah, I think like that's something to be said for reading an unfinished series, is like if you feel personally forced to go back and reread, because I mean, maybe other people don't feel that way, but when you read a lot of Romantasy and you're reading the same genre, like I couldn't just dive back in and be like, I remember every plot detail from that book, because I don't. And so it forces me to reread and like change my thinking a little bit.
Yeah.
So that's not always a bad thing, that you're feeling like I want to reread it and I want to dive back into like my thoughts on this a little bit deeper before the next book comes out.
Yeah. I also feel like I can't really rate. I feel like a rating wouldn't be fair at this point, because either I need to reread it or I need to read the second book. I was thinking about that today, how like hard it is to rate a series, because I don't know.
Well, that's like the conversation that I said earlier. Like I think I rated Gild pretty low, and knowing what I know, might have rated it higher.
Really?
Yeah. Because I understand why the things that were in there that I might not have liked as much actually were important. And so it changed my thought process on what those things were, you know?
That's how I'm feeling about Metal Slinger, where it's like I feel like I don't have enough information, like, and I really is about things that I don't know enough about, if that makes sense.
Yeah, totally.
Yeah.
All right. Well, that's definitely on my to read list for November. So,
I'm just glad I got to a book before you did.
I know. I think it's the first time all year that that's happened, right?
Yeah.
We read a lot of books together. I think we've read, what, 6 books together or 7 books together. But, and usually I'm the one who, just by nature of reading quicker, tend to read something before you.
Usually I'll start it like a day before you to try and like keep things a little bit even.
We
But
did good with Quicksilver, though, so that I think tells you something, because we were both really interested in reading it and able to kind of read at the same pace. So you quickened your pace for once.
Yeah, and actually, I think, well, you read at an unnatural pace.
I do read at an unnatural pace, I will admit that.
You're like crazy fast, and I'm maybe towards the slower end, so it's not a great pairing, but that's okay. We make it work.
We make it work. Shout out to Buddy Reed on Storygraph, because that helps us not spoil the book for each other.
Yeah, for sure. So that's been nice. But yeah, I mean, I feel like with Gild we stayed pretty good too until the end, and then I feel like you kind of took off, and I was like harder time finishing it. But anyways.
Yeah, I think that I was a little bit more interested at the end than you were, but I'll be interested to see your thoughts. Are you thinking that you might try the second one in November? Is that something we might be able to touch back on?
Maybe, yeah.
Okay.
So. Yeah.
Okay.
I don't know if I'll get through. You tend to go through a series like one, like just blast.
Yeah.
And I tend to like maybe do 2
take breaks,
and then do, you know. But I guess it depends on the series, because Blood and Steel, I plan to do that. I think I read 1 book in between 1 and 2. Maybe 1 in between 2 and 3, but by the 3rd one, I was like, no, I'm not waiting for the 4th one. Like, I have to keep going. So,
which is fair.
Yeah, it was great.
So, talking about books that aren't romantasy that you read in between, I read Before I Let Go, and This Could Be Us by Kennedy Ryan. So, she's a Black author. I hadn't read much by Black authors previously, and had heard really rave things about the way that she writes. And so they became available on audiobook. And I have a pretty hefty commute. It's about 30 or 45 minutes, a couple of days a week each way. So I was like, oh, I'll listen to these. I wasn't reading another book because I was spending my time at night also listening. So if that tells you something, like I'm going to listen to an audiobook in the car person, but for both of these books, I was listening to them at the house. I was listening to them at night and not reading because they were that good. Her writing is spectacular, and these are romance books like I haven't read. Highly recommend looking at her trigger warnings before you read them, because they are very serious topics. Both books have pretty horrible things that happen to the main characters, and they have to kind of learn how to overcome these. But the best part about the books is not actually the romance. It's not the spice, which all of that's there and all of it's very well done. The best part about this series is the friendships. She has, the books are, so book 1, Before I Let Go, it's about Yasmin. Book 2 is about Soledad, and then she's in the process of writing a 3rd book in the series about Hendrix, and that comes out in May. But they're all 3 best friends, and they met each other after Yasmin had a very traumatic thing happen to her. A couple of things happened to her, and they met at a yoga class, became best friends, and they're just kind of this like girl friend group that are there for each other through everything. They keep it real with each other. They always tell the truth. They help each other through the hard things, but they don't sugarcoat it. And it's just refreshing to see healthy, strong female friendships in a book, because I think a lot of the other romance books I've read this year, and I love reading romance, but they focus on the romance and the secondary characters are true secondary. And in Kennedy Ryan's books, the friendships are just as important as the romantic relationships, and the way the females are working on themselves. Therapy is highlighted and positive, mental health is like working on yourself is positive, all of those things. She does such a nice job of highlighting that. She also has a lot of disability awareness. Her son has autism, and she wrote characters in the second book who have autism, who are children. So she talked about being a parent of children who have autism, and she shares at the beginning of that book, like, this is my experience. This is not everybody's experience, but that's not seen in many books at all. Good disability representation. So I thought that was awesome, and it's not shown as being easy. She shows it as being very real. So I really can't say enough good things. I think the reason why these weren't like 5-star reads for me, and they were both 4.5, is the burn is slow and it drags a little. So like you're looking at 60 to 65% of the way through before the MMC FMC kind of get together, which felt a little slow. I could have done with a little bit of that middle part cut out probably and still gotten the same feelings from it. But overall, really, really excellent books. Like, I'm so excited for a third one. I have been recommending her to tons of people because I think her books are they're just deeper than a romance book. It's not just fluffy, stupid romance. So.
Yeah. Well, that's great. I've been having a hard time getting into non-fantasy now because so much happens in a fantasy book.
Yeah.
So it's good to hear that you've got some recommendations that might be good. Because I read it, the other books, I read 4. I read half of what Kim read this month. But which, that's fine. We all read at different paces. But my other book was I was looking for like a slice of life book, and I think honestly it probably delivered in that category, but then I was just kind of like, okay, this is just people's like daily life, like, come on, like, what's going on, like, what's happening, we need something going on.
You wanted them to be fighting monsters and they were just living their lives.
Yeah, they're just like buying puppies and like
going
on dates,
doing nice things, and you're like, where's the evil person?
Like, no one's been murdered in this book.
Where's the danger?
So I'm looking for like a really good romance that keeps me on my toes, but is, doesn't have to be fantasy. So we'll see. Do you have any plans for next month going forward?
So I'm going to read the one you recommended. I'm going to finish the Plated Prisoner series. So that'll be at least 4 books for the next month. I have Magnolia Parks, and that's been like burning a hole on my bookshelf because I have that one in paperback. And I got it a month ago, and I've been like, I don't know. So
I feel like I've heard conflicting things about that series.
That's what I think my holdup is I've heard conflicting things, but I feel like it's kind of a must read because it's been talked about enough that I want to form my own opinions. Yeah. And then I have Somewhere Beyond the Sea, and I got it when it came out in September, which is the second book to The House on the Cerulean Sea, for those of you who don't know, and I loved that book. That was a 5-star read for me, incredible.
That was a buddy read for us, right?
What?
That was another buddy read for us, wasn't it? Like
No. I read it first. I think so. I don't think we buddy read that because I read it when I went to Disney in January.
Okay. I read it in January too. I think it was.
Maybe we read it at the same time, but didn't like officially buddy read it.
I think we didn't know about the Storygraph buddy read.
Yeah, that could be it. We definitely read it. Okay, we read it around a similar time then.
We read it at the same time because I remember we were like it. We were not prepared. You chose it. Okay, it's coming back to me now. You chose it, and I was like, this is so not a book that you would choose. I still stand by that. um,
Yeah, that's a fair standby assessment, but
I explained it to my sister-in-law by saying that it's lightheartedly about the Antichrist, and that's like I feel like the best way to describe that book
it
because it's
it
like
absolutely is. There's no other good way to describe it. It's
no,
about monsters and the Antichrist,
yeah,
but it's lighthearted and endearing.
yeah,
Um,
it's
but
cozy
the,
fantasy. It's
yeah, it
like
is fantasy.
no, I said it's almost like cozy fantasy, but
Yeah,
it's like one notch above that. Like it's not quite as like settled as that, but
yeah, it's
uh,
not super cozy, but it's cozy enough. I don't
yeah,
know. It's probably in the middle, but I want to read the second book, and I've had it also sitting on my bookshelf since September. So I think that might be one that I'm reading. Um, but knowing I feel like I'm a mood reader, so something will probably spark my mood that won't be one of the books I just named, and I'll probably read something else. I'm also audiobooking Emily Henry's all of her books. So I did a reread of Beach Read on audiobook last month. I'm currently in a reread of Happy Place on audiobook right now. So I'm trying to go through her whole um, library because I really just like her, and they're just fun books
yeah,
to reread. So,
yeah.
what about you? What are you planning on reading for November?
Um, well, possibly the second book in the what is it called? The
Plated Prisoner.
Plated Prisoner
Yeah.
series. Just trusting you. So I'm not like super excited about it, but I trust that I will be at some point. So
I feel
um,
like you need to read it just so that we can have another conversation about whether my hype lived up correctly or not.
yeah.
So,
I think I want to read Legends and Lattes. I started the audio. I don't think you're gonna like the audio. But we'll see because we both got it on like library apps. So
yeah.
um, we'll see. But I probably will just physically read it. It's really hard for me to read a fantasy book that I've never read before, or like to consume it through like listening to it.
Yeah, I
Um,
agree.
so we'll see, but it might be a nice option. Um, I'd like to read a romance book that I'm like excited about. I have. The funny thing is, like, I didn't read any physical books this past month, but I'm like, maybe I'll read something on my TBR shelf, pick up an actual book.
But you just got a new Kindle for your
I did get
birthday.
a Kindle, which must be like,
Woo!
did they just release this one? Because I tried to find
Yeah,
a
they
case.
just released a new Paperwhite.
Okay,
Yeah.
so
Yep.
I tried to find a clear case to do the sticker, the cutesy sticker thing, and I had a really hard time finding a case. I got one, but it was gonna take like a week and a half to get to me. So, anyway, a good problem to have, I guess. It's nice
Yeah,
to
for sure.
have shiny. So, yeah, I don't know. I'm kind of just like on vibes right now. I'm just gonna kind of go where the wind blows me. I don't have too rigid of a plan, but those are my two ideas. I guess is it Glint, the
It's
second one,
Glint. Yeah, Glint is the second one.
and Legends and Lattes probably are the ones. I feel like Legends and Lattes was like a good October book, but I just had so many other things come up that I just didn't end up doing. It seemed like a good Halloweenish kind of vibe, so
Yeah.
maybe I'll try and tack that on and
And then in December, we're going to try to do a buddy read of Megan Quinn's new Christmas book. So
yeah.
something for us to look forward to in 2 months. Not there yet, but like getting into holiday mode and thinking that's coming. So,
Yep, that's right.
yeah.
Also, November is the third. Well, I don't know if you can consider it a third book. The first book in.
In the new duology for
Uh,
Serpent and the Wings of Night, The Crowns of Nyaxia.
yeah, so we'll probably. I guess we'll probably be reading that. I mean,
Yeah, I think we'll probably buddy read that.
I don't know if I'll finish it in November because it comes
Yeah,
out the
I
end.
think it comes out the 26th, and that's right before Thanksgiving. So I would guess both of us won't finish it, but that'll probably be discussed in November or December, but we'll probably start reading it in November for sure. I'm
Yeah,
really excited about that.
I was thinking about waiting until the second one came out, but I just got too excited. I feel like I want to be part of that the buzz. So I'll probably end up reading it.
And I think
Yeah,
there should be a lot of buzz around it because, Serpent and Wings of Night is just so highly regarded. So,
yeah, and that one ended on such a crazy. The first book, Serpent and Wings of
yes.
Night, such a
Yeah,
crazy.
I'd be surprised if this one doesn't wrench your soul open at the end of the first book.
I feel like actually now that we're talking about this book, I feel like Metal Slingers and that book, Serpent and the Wings of Night, the ending was like a similar
I
shock.
wondered if it was. I was like curious if it was that level of like shocking.
That's not spoiling anything for you. It's not the same.
But it's the same level of feeling that you had at the end of the book.
Yes, like the same, like just like what. But the difference is that one I could just go straight into the next.
Yes.
And so that's where my fear.
I couldn't. When I read Serpent, it wasn't out on paperback yet, and I didn't have KU at the time.
Okay.
Mistake. So I waited a month. I finished the first Serpent and then had to wait a month.
Wow. Well,
It was horrible.
We'll use this as a platform to say we are huge KU fans.
Yes.
Unlimited. I would say most of the books I read now are on Kindle Unlimited. Like,
Yeah.
I don't know. I feel like I've had a run of reading a lot of Kindle Unlimited books, so it's definitely been worth the money for.
I think that they've only upped the game of the books that they put on there. So
I had a Kindle Unlimited maybe a year before we got it again for that deal. We've had it for what now, like 6 or 7 months?
yeah, maybe 6 months.
But when I had it before, which was like spring, summer of 2023, I was not impressed. So I feel like they've really, like you said, upped their game and like made it worth it.
Yeah, and even authors who got popular from there seem to be putting their new books on there too, which is exciting. Like I feel like it's not deterring authors once they get famous from, self-publishing, or not deterred from putting their books on there.
Yeah,
So.
definitely. All right. Well, is there anything else that you wanted to say, or?
No, I think hopefully we gave everybody some good books to think about. If you haven't read Quicksilver, think about reading it. Probably read it. You should read it.
Was Quicksilver 5-star for you? I can't remember.
Yes, it was. It was.
I don't know. If not a 5-star, a 4.75 for me. Only because there are just a couple things that I was just like that still I think about, and I kind of am like. But for the most part, just like incredible magic, like
creative world, different series. Yeah.
All right. Well, thanks for watching and hearing about our October reads, and hopefully we'll get on next month and be able to give you a whole new list of fun things to read. Until next time. Bye.
Bye.